Full effect, huh? Early in the morning. Looks like all the just money, I had $2. Down to $2.
Hopefully it was a shirt.
Told you I'd be here. I'm ready for
Schedule our second lunch? I said, you want to schedule our second lunch? Schedule lunch?
work.
We do. We have TCJE. Finish the
Yeah, do you need, when I was working with, getting.
Do you want this?
We'll get started in just about 1 minute.
But I was too prideful for this.
Are you sure you don't want to share? You want to hold them just so that it's easier to get you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate disability right turn.
If you want to do that when it's your turn to go, it's quick to get to the front. Perfect. Yeah, that's awesome. Right there is great. Yeah.
Glad you're going to be here, right behind you.
Yeah, I think if y'all can just squeeze in, make yourselves comfortable. Awesome. If y'all want to go ahead and try and squeeze in a little too, perfect.
No, you're good. He's gonna catch me by call, so.
You're doing great. Be perfect. Early. What time?
You ready? Wonderful, wonderful. Good, good, good. Yep, y'all ready? Yes. Good morning. My name is James Tallarico. I have the honor of serving Texas House District 50 in the Texas Legislature. I also have the honor of serving on the Texas House Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee, which I will say has the distinction for being the least requested committee in the Texas House. And the Speaker is always surprised when I request to be on it, but it's because as a former public school teacher, I know that the kids in our justice system are the most vulnerable kids in our state. They need and deserve our help. For more than a century, kids in Texas child prisons have been beaten, raped, and even murdered behind bars. The incarceration that we inflict on our kids causes unimaginable trauma, and it leads kids to be more likely to commit crimes in the future, not less. That's why I'm filing this bill to close all child prisons in Texas by 2030 and use that money to fund a system that actually rehabilitates kids in Texas. Child prisons are a failed policy experiment. We know that kids who are incarcerated are 3 times more likely to commit a future felony compared to their peers who are diverted from incarceration and given proper treatment. We know that this doesn't work. It's not only immoral, it's ineffective. And this has been happening in our state for more than 100 years. The first child prison was established in 1887 in Gatesville, Texas, and it quickly gained a reputation for being a brutal and ruthless labor camp. And despite decades of reforms, this system still abuses and traumatizes kids every day. So our state government currently operates 5 child prisons, spending roughly $300 million a year to incarcerate approximately 600 kids. Children as young as 10 years old are removed from their communities and imprisoned in rural parts of our state, sometimes 500 miles away from their families. The kids we are throwing in prison are the most vulnerable in our state. 95% have experienced household trauma. 91% of the girls in our system are likely sex trafficking victims, and 84% have serious unmet mental health needs. Half the kids in our child prisons are on suicide watch. Prisons are designed to isolate, shame, and dehumanize people. And as an educator, I don't know any child, or any human being for that matter, who gets better with isolation, shame, or dehumanization. Children are like sponges, and they absorb the trauma and violence that incarceration inflicts. Our system is taking kids who've experienced violence and turning them into experts in violence. That's why this system hasn't worked, doesn't work, and will never work. Last year, news broke that our child prisons in Texas are on the brink of collapse. Kids are being locked in windowless cells for 23 hours a day and urinating in empty water bottles. We are at a crossroads. We can either keep funding what doesn't work, or we can finally fund what does. And we know what works. Unlike child prisons, interventions like probation, mental health treatment, anti-violence programs, they actually reduce child violence and child crime. We know what works. And all of the evidence, all of the research tells us that these interventions are most successful, most effective when they are done in a child's community, closer to family, closer to support systems, and closer to home. That's why states like Kansas and Utah are already moving away from child prisons. That's why here in Texas, Republicans and Democrats in this legislature have already come together to close 8 child prisons since 2007. And we've diverted those kids back to their local communities to receive rehabilitation and to get back on their feet. And you know what has happened in our state since we've closed those 8 child prisons? Youth crime has gone down. Youth crime has declined. We've got to finish the job. It's time to throw child prisons into the dustbin of history where they belong, with child labor and child brides. My bill, HB 4356, would replace the Texas Juvenile Justice Department with a new office of youth safety and rehabilitation. And that office would use the savings from closing child prisons to fund a system that actually rehabilitates kids closer to home, including secure rehab centers for our toughest cases. This bill, and all the people that you see standing behind me, are trying to answer a gut-wrenching question. How do we help kids who have been both the victims of violence and sometimes the perpetrators of violence? Dr. King told us, returning violence for violence only multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Child prisons in our state multiply violence, and it's time to let the light in. My fellow Christians and I are observing Lent in preparation for Easter in a few weeks. And in our faith, the God of love is crucified on a cross of violence, but rose again. Easter is a reminder that love is so much stronger than violence, and it wins in the end. I am so proud to stand with the young activists who helped me write this bill and are going to help me pass this bill, some of whom were incarcerated as kids. And now they are fighting to transform a system that hurt them so it doesn't hurt others. Love wins in the end. And if you need proof of that, look no further than the leaders standing behind me. I want you to hear from some of the leaders, but first, I want to introduce one of the best, most effective advocates for children in our system in the Texas House, and that's my colleague and my friend, Representative Jarvis Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Let me thank Reverend James Tallarico. His voice sounds like he needs to be on a podcast. But let me thank Representative Tallarico for his leadership, and certainly the young people that are standing here as activists and laborers as we try to fix what we know is a problem in this state and in this country. The Bible says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. Thousands of years ago when that was written, the Bible was and understood that children had redemptive qualities, that mistakes will be made, but mistakes are for correction and learning, not for shame and punishment. And unfortunately, children that make mistakes are shamed and are punished, and that punishment oftentimes follows them the rest of their years, making it very difficult for them to elevate, making it very difficult for them to see the success or even desire to have the success that is in their minds. I always say children will be what children see. And what children are seeing right now is not a healthy world. And so they're emulating. As opposed to rehabilitating them, we are incarcerating them. In 1994, I was a 21-year-old college student at Texas Southern University, and I ran a program called Phoenix Outreach Youth Center. There was a little kid that came to my program. His name was Alan. He was 9 years old, and he was angry. He lost both of his parents in a car accident, and he had to go live with his grandmother. The uncle happened to be there one day, and Alan was having one of his bad days just because he was an angry child that just did not understand why God took his parents from him. But he goes to church every Wednesday and every Sunday, and he was simply asking why. And to a young person, oftentimes they don't understand the world and how it operates sometimes. And as an adult, I don't understand how God operates. But Alan was upset, and he broke some things. And his uncle punished him by giving him a whipping. Unfortunately, it left a mark, and consequently, Alan had to go to a group home. And in that group home, he stayed for a year because the grandmother and the uncle could not seemingly get the household together. Alan stayed in that program for 6 years. And during that time, he moved from group home to foster care, until eventually, by the time he was 17 years old, he committed another crime and ended up going to jail. None of this was his fault, and nowhere along the way did the system support Alan. But what they wanted to do was simply lock him up, and that's what they did. And he went from the juvenile system to the adult system. This is what we see over and over and over again, where we're not rehabilitating our children, we're simply incarcerating them. What society do we live in where we simply allow one mistake from a child to be the death sentence for them for the rest of their years? And so I hope that this bill, and I stand with my colleague because I think it's very important that we do get rid of prisons, that we put money into the preventive measures. We can do the preventive measures as opposed to always doing the interventive. We need to make sure that we're building hope, that one ingredient that everybody in this room has. Everybody woke up today with simply saying, I hope this is going to be a great day. I hope that I'm going to get that job today. I hope that story that I'm going to write will be picked up today. That's what makes you wake up every day and want to be your best. But when a child that is incarcerated is told every day you're worthless, they're 12, 13, 14 years old, you're worthless, you're never going to amount to anything. That's when you'll see a child decide life is just not that important. And they throw themselves away because society threw them away. I hope that this bill would help us end child incarceration. I hope it ends child slavery, because we understand what the system is. I know that's going to irritate some people, but the penal system is just that. And I hope in this state and across this country that we can put our children on a redemptive path, so that they can be the success that they desire in their minds. So to my brother, thank you. I'll be at church next Sunday, and we'll continue this labor of love as we continue to work with our children to give them a brighter days and a brighter path. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson. I now want to introduce one of the most effective advocates on this issue, my friend Jennifer Toon.
Oh, you go first. Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Never mind, not Jennifer Toon. She will come after.
Excuse me, how you guys are doing? My name is Jannar Brown. I'm a member of CA4Y Collection Actor for Youth. I was a former TJJ resident. I was incarcerated at the age of 16. I didn't get sentenced until 2018, so I sat in juvenile detention for 2 years. I actually had to get transferred into the adult county because I was too old to sit in Harris County Juvenile Center. So I was still going to juvenile court, but I was in an adult facility, which was nerve-wracking for me because I didn't know I was going to survive. I'm a kid. They told me I was going to county. They just knocked on my door and said, hey, get ready, you're going to county. Huh? It's like, I'm a baby. I don't know nothing about county, but I wasn't making baby decisions neither. I won't be naive. I won't lie. I know what I was doing, and I know what I was doing was wrong, but I was never taught how to do it the right way. I was always shown that this is the way to do it, so I went that way. Implementing these things in front of a child is you can manipulate the mind and make the mind believe that it is okay to do these things when that is all what you see until you see something else. And as going through the TJJD facilities, I was 8 hours away. I was in Evans Regional Juvenile Center, and it was very stressful to know that I'm 8 hours away from my mother that actually supports me 115%, and I can't hug her no more. I can't get the loving to keep me going, to be able to accept my punishment and do my time effectively. It was actually tearing and wearing me down as a kid because I'm like, man, who got an answer for all these questions I got? I got a million of them. I can't get one answer. And that's stressful because it caused frustration in the mind to where it's like, oh, am I doing wrong? And just like the brother just mentioned, it makes you feel like life is not worth living for no more because no one cares. When you're steady trying to be right and you know what you're doing is wrong and you're looking for the right answer and no one's trying to give it to you, you yourself as a human being will give up and say, forget it. Because this is all I know anyway, so why not do it? That's what a child mind thinks. And I'm going off of experience of what I was thinking as a child, as a 16-year-old in the mind, with no father figure, no guidance. I still have yet to know how to change oil on a car because of the lack of support, the lack of guidance, the lack of love in the community that we all reside in. And that's why we have to show that love to the kids and nurture them correctly because we have kids with so much potential to be so great, but we have yet to pour or invest in them. What we do is take from them. And what I mean by take from them, you take from them mentally by sitting them somewhere, isolating a child who's very friendly, who loves talking, who loves playing, and you sit him by himself, and he has yet to even know himself. So that's even more stressful because you got him stuck and confined inside of a spot with a person that he has yet to identify yet because he's still a child. And the mind doesn't fully develop until the age of 25. So how does this guy really know until he gets there? But what if by the time he get there, it's too late? We have to stop before it's too late. Right now, as we're talking, it's a child right now being neglected, being bullied, being raped, being abused. We have to stop it. We have to stop it, because what it's gonna do is gonna have those kids that one day who's going to get out with a whole lot of hate and resentment in their heart for the world. They're not gonna have it just towards an individual. They're not gonna have it towards that judge. It's gonna be to the whole world. And now what the world is gonna do is shine upon something that they created, that they cannot destroy because it's too big. This number is too large. Those kids that's gonna come home, they miss their mamas, they miss their brothers, they miss their daddies, they miss their family, and they still got answers that has yet been, they got questions that has yet been answered. They still have mental disabilities that no one has yet to care to tend to. They still lack education. Juvenile teaches us at a 3rd grade level. So I was sent to TJJD by the age of 18. I'm 18 years old learning 3rd grade work. I'm learning fractions and decimals that I've been learned. It's no growth. It's no development. It's nothing but destruction. And when they come home, they continue to destroy because they have nothing that can have them constructive. Like pre-trade classes in middle school, something that can have them licensed on a piece of paper to be able to say that, hey, I've been trained and well equipped for this, and let me show you my work ethics. Let me show you my attributes. We have to give those a chance. I got a slogan. You're either going to give that child a chance or you're going to have to give them a consequence. You're either going to put them in position to succeed or one day you will have to penalize him. Which one would you rather do? Thank y'all.
Quinn.
Would you mind spelling your name real quick, your first and last name?
JERNARDBROWN.
How old are you?
23 now.
Yeah, get the name right, because I think some of us may be voting for Quinn for public office, it sounds like one day, which we'd be very lucky to do. Now, I want to bring up one of my dear friends, Jennifer Toon.
Thank you, and thank you for your brave voice this morning. I know personally how difficult that is, and I will do my best to be professional and not start crying. So my name is Jennifer Toon, and I work at the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. When I was 15, I was sentenced under determinate sentencing to what was known as the Texas Youth Commission. And if you study the youth prison system in Texas, you will see the system change names as it cycles through, violence and scandal and reforms. So at the time, it was called the Texas Youth Commission. And the type of abuse that I witnessed and experienced with the girls that I was incarcerated with in a rural facility in West Texas is still very, very difficult to discuss. It still haunts me as an adult. The things that happened to us there, you can imagine as girls. I don't have to lay that out here. We believe that we deserve that because of the things that we had done to be there. I was sent there, and I had committed a really serious offense, a violent offense, deep in mental health crisis. Representative Tallarico talked about the large majority of the population of the kids that are there is severe mental health issues and a lot of kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So our most vulnerable kids, and I was one of those kids. And we were preyed upon and taken advantage of, and we really believed that we deserved it. But we lived, like Representative Johnson talked about, we lived with a hope that maybe, just maybe, if people knew what was happening to us, this would stop. This would come to a complete and total halt and end. So you can imagine my surprise and my deep sense of feeling betrayed when I got out and started to do this work and to look through the history of Texas youth prisons and see that it has been decade after decade after decade of the same stuff, of the same cycles of abuse and reform, abuse and reform. And it feels like it's because of that population of kids. If it was a different population of children, that at some point it would have stopped. And I think it's really important, if we understand the problem, to understand what kids we're talking about. Why is this happening? So I I'm excited about this bill. We've worked extensively on it because it calls for a new vision of youth justice. Why are we going to pour resources and money into a system? I don't care how often you change its name. I don't care about the supposed reforms. It is still the same beast in different clothing. And we've got to demolish it and build something new from the ground up. And so I am just so proud to be here with these advocates, these young people, and representatives that finally get what the issue is. So I'm excited about the bill, and I can't wait for everyone to be on board and to get this passed. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think we're seeing from both Quinn and Jennifer how powerful their stories are, their examples are, and I'm hoping this bill gives them more opportunities to share those stories with the policymakers in this building. I now want to invite up Tiffany, who will speak about her experience as a staffer at TJJD.
My name is Tiffany. I worked for Giddings State School for almost 2 years. I was working the mental health dorm. So I kind of know a lot about what some of the kids that were going through that nobody wants to hear on, nobody wants to speak about. If no one talks about it, it doesn't matter. It's not an issue. In August, after having my daughter, I was left in my menstrual cycle from 9:30 in the morning all the way until 7 o'clock at night till I got home. None of the staff gave me a restroom break, no matter how many times I pleaded. It was because of those kids that I was working on at that dorm, because of the respect they had for me. They all went into their cells just so I could go use the restroom and try to clean up as fast as I could. Nobody said anything except, "Oh, we're sorry." So you're telling me for all those hours I was in my menstrual cycle after having my daughter, I had to be in bloody clothes until it was time for me to get home. I was told no, I couldn't run to the Walmart right up the street to go and clean myself up, get new clothes. I was told no. I was told, "Oh, we're sorry." And when I did contact attorneys and lawyers, because that's not okay to do to someone, plenty of lawyers wanted the case until they heard, "Oh, it's Giddings State School. Oh, well, we're not going to touch it." So you're telling me it's okay to violate my human right to use the restroom. Now, if that's happening to me, what are you guys doing to the kids that you don't want no one to be talked about? In November, day after Thanksgiving, which we all know holidays are some of the hardest days for our kids that are in there, a fight broke out, and I was in the back. 2 other people in the front, they didn't care. They put kids in dorms that they don't mix. They're always into fights. Well, it just so happened the day after Thanksgiving, there was a fight. And I ended up falling. The kid tripped me, which in my opinion, it wasn't done by, on purpose. It was the heat of the moment type thing. I ended up falling, fracturing my foot, both of my knees. My right side is now permanently disabled, and I have 5 kids at home. I can't play with them like I need to. I can't teach my kids to ride bikes. And it's all because the state wants to put kids that don't mix together. We tell these kids just to walk away to where they're confined in a small day room. We're telling them to walk away from bullies. They got nowhere to go to. They don't do school in the schools. When they go to school, all the teachers do is they let them play music. They let them do the bare minimum. They're really not learning anything. It turns into a nightclub during school. How is that beneficial to these kids? How are you gonna put bullies in with bullies and expect to change? These kids go in there for one offense, but they don't get to go home. They're catching more charges inside of a state facility. Because what? They have nowhere to go. Where are they gonna walk to? They're not learning in schools. Instead, they put these kids in a security unit as a punishment. The TBRI stuff that they were making us do, to be honest, it was a joke. It was a bribe. If you guys do your behavior plans, if you guys do what you're told, I'll bring you pizza, I'll bring you chips, I'll bring you soda, I'll bring you anything from the free world. You just have to do this. How is that teaching them? Because that's not like that out here. You can't just, oh, well, if you give me pizza, I'll go get on the right track. Or I'll do this. We're not teaching them anything. They don't help those kids. The reason why most of those kids get on essay is because they're not getting the right attention that they need. So they think if they cut themselves, if they try to hang themselves, which that's hard. They want attention, so they're gonna go hang themselves, and you just have to hope and pray that you're the staff member that gets there that can get the kid off in time. And that was hard. If the state doesn't even care about the employees as far as their basic human right to use the bathroom, or when they get hurt, they just tell you, I'm sorry. Well, tell my kids you're sorry, because I have 5 kids that I can't do the normal stuff with because I need my husband's help to pretty much stand or walk. But the state doesn't care about any of that. They just care about the money. And it's not fair to them because we're not teaching them the right way, even for the free world. They get out and they end up going to adult systems. It's not the way. I've never agreed with how getting state school did any of it. But I stayed because I wanted to be the one that these kids could go to. And they've had a really good rapport that they could trust, that they could talk to. I was that person until I became physically disabled and I could no longer do it anymore. It's got to change because the staff at Giddings, I can tell you, it's not about changing them. It's about pizza and ice cream. It's not about them getting their education. It's about turning into a dance club where they get to listen to whatever music they want, doesn't matter how explicit, whatever. These teachers just do what they can just to get through the day, but they don't learn a single thing. All right, I need to go sit down. My leg start. My leg's twitching.
Good morning. My name is Alicia Castillo. I'm Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Texas Center for Justice and Equity. I'm also a former educator, and I worked with children with intellectual and developmental disabilities and children with behavioral challenges, and students of all ages. I worked at a specialized learning center that really specialized on developmentally and age-appropriate responses to children with needs. And in my years of, but before I get to that, I do want to just acknowledge and say thank you to our incredible speakers today. It takes a tremendous, incredible amount of bravery to share such vulnerable and traumatic stories and to have to relive that, not only here in front of you all, but every single night when they lay down and go to bed. And through my years of work on juvenile justice policy and research, I've had countless conversations with so many folks, not only folks who survived the system as children who were incarcerated or staff, but also their moms. I've spoken for hours with those moms, and as a new mom myself, the pain and trauma that they're experiencing is an additional level of horror that is happening in our own neighborhoods today. I've also spent countless hours talking with correctional leaders, and that's our TJAD administrators, our probation chiefs across the state, and prosecutors and defense attorneys, and everyone who has a stake in the well-being of kids. And despite the fact that some of the Texas leaders that we have in our administration right now are some of the best people that could possibly be there, they are given an impossible job of equally enacting retribution on children and seeking to rehabilitate them. It's impossible to do. And so while you've heard today from folks who have been directly impacted by the system, I want to share that it's not just them, and it's not just advocates who want to see a change. It's also correctional leaders themselves and prosecutors across the country. I have a letter here today that Fair and Just Prosecution put together. It's a joint statement on closing youth prisons from correctional leaders and prosecutors across the country, many of whom are from Texas, some of whom are former TJJD executive directors, who all agree that we need age and developmentally appropriate interventions for children in this state, and we need to move away from this failed practice of incarcerating children. So I'm excited, and I want to thank the representative for filing such a transformative bill and finally seeking to take the next step on youth justice reform in the state. Back in 2007 and 2011, we did a lot. We set the state up to close 8 of the 14 facilities that there were at that time. There are only 5 that remain, and I think we have the folks that we need to figure out how we can bring us down to 0 youth prisons in Texas.
Thank you, Alicia. I first want to just emphasize a few of the points that have been made across the different speakers. I think we can all agree that child prisons and the trauma that's occurring in those prisons is unacceptable. The status quo is immoral, but it's also ineffective. It just doesn't work. It doesn't solve the problem that it says that it solves. And I think Gernard made the point earlier that these kids are going to be coming back to our communities. It's up to us how they return. And right now, we are sending them to these child prisons that are making them experts in violence and that are re-traumatizing them and multiplying the abuse they've already experienced. And so I just want to thank all the speakers who are here. I think if I could get one point across, it would be that the data, the evidence, proves what we all know in our hearts to be true. Children do not belong in prison. I also want to, this is my fault too, we had, the list of speakers is different. We had some changes last minute this morning, so I just want to read through the speakers we've had and make sure you have all their names correct. So the last speaker we heard was Alicia Castillo, ALCIA-CASTILLO. And then we had Tiffany Jones, that's TIFFANY, Jones, JONES. Then we had Jennifer Toon, so that's JENNIFERTOON. And then we had Gernard Brown, JERNARDBROWN. And then you all know Jarvis Johnson. Not gonna spell his name. So with that, happy to open it up for questions. For me, for Representative Johnson, or any of the advocates that we've had here this morning. Yes.
With Speaker Phelan advocating for another bill for HB 16 that's similar in this, how is that partnering, if at all, any support for this closer to home bill that Chair Moody has versus this bill?
Yeah, great question. And I've had conversations with Speaker Thielen about transforming our juvenile justice system, and I'm proud that in the Texas House we have a speaker who's committed to transforming not just juvenile justice, but our criminal justice system overall. And I would say that Representative Moody's bill, who we've also been in constant contact with, his bill is very complementary to our bill. Obviously, his is more focused on kind of the preventative side, and ours is focused on what we do with the facilities and the kids that are already there. But both work very well together. And so I was thrilled to see Representative Moody's bill be deemed a priority piece of legislation for the Texas House. And I think that just underscores that this is not a partisan issue, right? I know Representative Johnson and I are both Democrats, but there are members in both political parties, in both chambers, that know the status quo is not working. They know child prisons are not only immoral, they are ineffective, and that rehabilitation is the way forward. Other questions?
Do you have a Senate sponsor?
Say it again?
Do you have a Senate sponsor?
Not yet, no. You know, this, as you have, if those of you who've already read the legislation, it's pretty complex. We're trying to do a lot of things, and we've been working with a lot of different stakeholders, even up to yesterday, to make sure that this bill is reflective of what we think can actually work. It is not a perfect piece of legislation, and I hope by going through the process, it's going to get polished and improved. But this, I should clarify, is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. And we are hoping to not only work with those who have been hurt by this system, but with policymakers in both parties, in both chambers, to finally do away with child prisons in this state and make Texas a leader on juvenile rehabilitation, which it once was. And we hope to reclaim that status for Texas going forward.
The budget proposals in the House and Senate initially are suggesting actually adding more youth prisons. How have you come up against that, and what kind of work are you doing?
You know, I know there is alarm from members in both political parties, in both chambers, about this strategy of doubling down on youth prisons in Texas. You know, all the speakers, but Alicia Castillo talked about that we are moving away from this practice, right? We've already closed 8 in the last decade, and juvenile crime has gone down. And so we are moving in the right direction. Our bill is about finishing that job and finally putting these child prisons in the dustbin of history where they belong. But the current proposals from Sunset don't do that. I do, and I should say that we have talked extensively with Sunset, with the agency. Again, this is a group effort, team effort. And I know that the leaders at the agency do share in many ways our ultimate goal. I think the disagreement is about how to get there and what path to take forward. Representative Johnson.
As a member of Appropriations, and I'm on Article 145, this conversation came up, and one of the conversations that were had is that how do we fix the problem with the same mindset that created it? You don't just go build another facility, make it bright and shiny, and think that we are rehabilitating children. We have to have some consistency with leadership, then with training, and then with putting boots on the ground. So the notion is to make sure that dollars then go down to the counties so that the counties can handle the problem locally as opposed to having these state prisons where we know are not being successful. So the idea is to filter the money down to the counties. And that has been a conversation that we have had with TJJD.
Other questions?
I have one follow-up on that. So filter the money down to county. Sorry, Representative Jonathan.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I just have a follow-up question. So when you say filter money down to the counties, would that be for rehabilitation?
Sure. I mean, we don't want to continue to be interventive. There are so many different programs that we could use as opposed to the threat of locking a child up. So the idea is to find ways in which the county can create alternative programs to incarceration. But at some point or another, we're going to have to start the process of preventing children from getting involved in activity all the while. I analogize that to a dentist. When you have cavities, you know, they could remove one cavity, but if you ain't brushing your teeth and flossing, then, you know, you're going to have another. And if you continue to eat bad, you're going to have another. So at the end of the day, we have to get to that point where we are educating. We are putting children in a position by which they can succeed versus, again, being in an environment that dictates that this is the path that they must take. And unfortunately, in this country, in particular this state, again, children will be what they see. Oftentimes, children that are being incarcerated are watching parents and family members, and so we have to break that vicious cycle. There is a move, and there is a spirit from others that want to continue to see this. We live in a competitive society. They want to continue to see the competition go away. So no, we don't want to have, you know, preventive programs, but absolutely, if you want to save taxpayer dollars, if you want to stop building prisons, because we don't need to continue to be the leaders in certain areas. And one area that we know we lead all the time is incarceration. And that's the thing that Texas cannot be, that shouldn't be a moniker that we should be proud of. So we have to change that. So the interventive part is across the board what I think is very necessary. The preventive part makes certain people feel comfortable and good because they say, oh, we're locking them up. But you're locking them up for what? To release them to do the same thing again? When we need to be educating to make sure that they never go in the first place.
And sorry, one more.
Sure.
How much money is in the budget allocated for that? Do you know?
Was it 400 million? 200 million.
Okay.
Yeah. 200 million too much for another, you know, facility. When closing schools and opening prisons just does not make sense to me. And, you know, we have a state governor that continues to want to close schools. I'm from Harris County, Houston, so, you know, it's just not where we should be putting our emphasis.
When you talk about preventative action, do you mean like in our schools, our public schools right now, and then also in the foster care system? I mean, for, like, as an example.
I think there are a lot of ways by which the foster care system, along with, there's so many different after-school outreach programs, programs that I'm working with right now to make sure that we're putting police officers in school, not to be patrolling, but to be training so that we can have interaction and dialogue with police officers. The problem has always been when children see an officer, the first thing they say is, look at that asshole. The officer looks at that child and says, look at that little asshole. And so we're just going back and forth. Nobody sits in the room to say, oh, you're not that bad, and you're not that bad either. So I think when you get to have programs like that, so again, it's along with schools, but when we're seeing it happening in schools, we can identify those children. We can identify and have the wraparound services that those children need. You'll have some that may say, well, that's just a waste of taxpayer dollars. I would prefer to spend $100 keeping this child out of jail versus spending $2,000 incarcerating that person. And that's, you know, dollars and cents, it just makes more sense to spend $100 versus the $2,000. But, you know, again, to some, they feel good to know that that little child was locked up because they're no longer doing crime on the streets, but yet there's somebody else who's going to be doing the same thing over and over again. So we got to break the cycle. So it's involved in a multitude of different organizations being participatory in that $200 million.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we've talked about child prisons being immoral, being ineffective, but we should acknowledge they're also very expensive. $300 million per year for 600 kids, that's $500,000 per child, right? $500,000 could buy you the best therapist, the best counselor, the best tutor, right? So I think, again, back to Representative Johnson's point and the points being made by all the speakers, this money could be spent on doing what works, what we know works, what the evidence tells us works, which is rehabilitating kids so that they can rejoin society. And that's ultimately how we're all safer. The goal of this bill is public safety, safety for all of us. And when every one of us is safe, we're all safer. Other questions? Well, thank you again all for being here, and I'm happy to chat afterwards with anybody who has other questions. Also, just again, want to thank my colleague, Representative Johnson, and the incredible, brave speakers who've shared their stories here today. Thank you.
Can we get a